Favorite movie and why?
I'm gonna go with the Patriot right now.
Oh, that's such a good movie.
Yeah, there's so many that come to my mind. Like I got Pulp Fiction, The Sandlot. Like I'm
Yeah.
all over the place, and like I could probably watch The Sandlot on mute and still know every line.
Yep.
But I think just for the conversation that we've had, the things that it brings out in me, the father and the love of country and he is the warrior in the garden. He didn't want to go to war,
Yeah.
but when he showed up, he was there.
Yeah,
And
dude. Mel Gibson is savage in that movie. In this
and
in the scene where they
it's
kill his son and he goes after
yeah,
the redcoats. I mean,
yeah,
that's like man possessed. That's some savage shit in that scene.
yeah, and that's the switch that savage gentlemen have and people who are capable can do. So it hits me I loved it as a kid, but it hits me differently as a father
Yeah.
who has had that kind of experiences now. And yeah, I'm gonna go with that and stick there.
Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's Scott Groves here with my new friend, Chris Nastasi, and we got introduced in kind of a weird roundabout way. Many people who know me or follow my Instagram have seen that my wife and I are launching an Apogee school, and Apogee School kind of came out of the brain trust of Matt Bedreau and Tim Kennedy, who really started and founded this idea of Apogee Men, which is just a program for young men and older men like myself and Chris to just get better, have some people to kind of like commune with, and just really like grow as individuals, as fathers, as husbands, as men. And, I think that's the most important thing that we can do in our life. So I met Chris. He was in part of the founding class. So now he is an Apogee coach. He's launching a program for men and fathers who want to be top producers, top performers. And then we started chatting on Instagram, and he's like, oh yeah, I was in the Army. And I was like, oh, I was in the Army too. And he's like, I played pro baseball. And I'm like, yeah, I threw a baseball one time. So there's a lot of good stuff for us to dive into. I know you are a husband, two beautiful young children, a couple dogs that we're worried might be shitting in the house that you might have to break away for. Hence the reason we're doing this by Zoom. You got a lot going on at your house. But what did
Yeah.
I miss, Chris? Like, where'd you grow up? What's the Reader Digest Batman origin
Yeah.
story of Chris?
Yeah. First, just want to say thank you, Scott, for having me. This is awesome. Great opportunity. I'm grateful to be here and to have a conversation and for the world to hear it, right? So I grew up on the East Coast. I am a New York, Long Island born and raised kid on the North Shore. Didn't really want or need for nothing in my family, like just very, very lucky. Had a great childhood for the most part. And then, you know, did the whole hockey, baseball, football thing growing up. Really enjoyed being outside. Like I will say that from the earliest I can remember, my mom would lock the door all from spring to fall and said I was not allowed inside. And that was kind of the way it was. And I really enjoyed that life.
Where were you at in New
It's,
York?
so I grew up on Long Island. It's
Okay.
a small blue collar town on Long Island called Bayville.
Yeah.
A lot of fishermen, a lot of firemen, a lot of police officers. It's about an hour east outside of the city.
Okay, so
So
I have a 21-year-old that lives in Ronkonkoma. His mom is back east, so he's on Long Island. I get out there to see him once in a blue moon. I try to get him out here because it's cold and not comfortable in New York. Like I just feel like it creates tough men because it's like the summers are super humid and miserable and disgusting, and the winters are really cold and there's a lot of traffic, and it's like just tough people come out of Long Island.
it's funny you say that because we'll get into the whole army career stuff, but I spent 8 years in Savannah, Georgia, and the summers there have ruined me and my wife. Like when we were like deciding where we were gonna live, she's like, I can't handle another southern summer.
Right.
So so now we're even further north. We're in southern Maine right now, and we spent last winter in Montana in Bozeman, and we love the cold. I love four seasons, and it's awesome. And like you said, I have two young kids, and innately the cold will make them tougher. That I don't have to do all everything.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. I'm such a pansy, man. Like I feel like I could have if I stayed in the military, I feel like I could have gone through like Ranger school during the summer, maybe made it through like Robin Sage. Like I can put a lot of stuff on my back and walk long distances when it's warm. But when I see what these Navy SEALs go through of like freezing their ass off in the like cold surf, I'm like, no, there's no chance. The cold would break me immediately. Like I am a Southern California boy through and through. And now I live in Vegas where it's even hotter. But like the 3 years that I was stuck at Fort Riley, Kansas, pulling guard duty in like 12-degree weather, I'm like, why does anybody voluntarily live north of like North Texas? It's so confusing to me. The cold is just miserable, but you're just another more proof you're a stronger man than I.
Well, here's also the secret too, is I could choose what I want to wear now.
Right. Oh man. All right. So you were obviously way into baseball, right? I read that you played in college and tried to make a run at the major leagues. Didn't quite work out. Tell us about that journey.
So yeah, I played in college. Had a great experience. I wouldn't say I had a run at the major leagues. I played 2 years of independent ball, so not affiliated to any big league teams. You know, I think I'll say it all the time. Everything happens for a reason, but sometimes I wish I wasn't as good as I was, because I was as good to like have the hope, but I really probably wasn't as good to make it.
Right.
And that kept me hanging on just a little bit longer than I should have.
Right. And
what
do you think is the difference? Like, what's the difference between the guys that can be all-star college players, but not quite good enough for the big show? Is it physical gifts? Like, do you wish you would have had better training or rehab or just been on steroids? Like, what's the jump to go from a really great amateur to like, I at least made it to the pros?
I think just like life, it's consistency, right? I the old version of me, the younger, bitter version of me would be like, oh, I wish I had a little bit more size, right? I wish I could run a little faster. But looking back on it now, as like, I would like to think a mature man, in my 20s, I wasn't there. I wasn't mature enough. And I say it all the time too, I joined the Army at 28. I turned 29 in basic, and I was in Ranger school at 30. And I'm looking at these dudes that are doing it at 18, and I'm like, physically I was there. Mentally I wasn't. And that was the difference of me in my ball career too. Like my mid-20s were rough. I was asleep. I was asleep. I was drinking. I lacked a lot of confidence. I had a lot of holes I needed to fill, and it wasn't the right time. You know, maybe in a different scenario with a better head on my shoulders, I might have had a better chance at playing better. But let's call it what it is. I think the talent was just under. I say this all the time at everything I do. I don't consider myself to be the top talent anything. I am above average at a lot of things. I truly believe that. But what made me a really great Ranger was the consistency that I didn't have as a ball player.
Yeah. Youth is wasted on the young, right?
Yeah.
I remember, and I've told this story a couple times on the podcast, so anybody who's like a frequent listener can fast forward 5 minutes. But I was in LA one time, and I ordered like the cheapest Uber, right? And this like Escalade pulls up, and there's this dude that's probably 7 foot tall in the front seat of the Escalade. He's so tall, like his knees are on the steering wheel. And we had a long ride. I'm like, all right, man, what's the story? Like, clearly you're supposed to be playing pro basketball. He's like, yeah, I played for Arkansas. I was like all SEC. Didn't quite make it to the NBA. Went and toyed around like the European leagues for a couple years, made some money, and now I'm back here. I'm driving Uber because what I really want to do is launch a basketball academy, because he said with people not playing 4 years in college anymore, the only way to become like an NBA coach is you find a 12-year-old LeBron. You coach him all the way through high school. You coach him. You're an assistant coach at Duke for 1 year, and then the NBA picks you up as basically a kickback for you nurturing this kid through 7 years. And so I started talking to him about exactly what we're talking about. I'm like, all right, so you're clearly built like Lamar Odom. What's the difference between you not making the NBA, Lamar Odom being a starter, and then Dirk Nowitzki being a superstar? And his answer is not going to be shocking to you. He said it was consistency of schedule. He's like, I was young, I was dumb, I didn't get in for the stretching, I didn't get in for the extra free throws, I didn't stay late for the stretching and the recovery and the ice baths and all the stuff that would have made me stay on the court longer and get more reps and then become better and then have a shot. And he's like, if I would have just taken my schedule seriously from 18 to 22, I really think I would have played in the NBA. But I just didn't have that maturity, and I'm looking to instill that into some younger kids. And I was like, dude, how crazy that the difference between this guy driving Uber for $25 an hour and Lamar Odom playing for the Lakers for $20 million a year might have just been like, didn't really master my schedule.
Right. And I believe that. Look, I mean, in the Apogee program, we have all these men that come in and mentor and they tell us their stories, right? And the thing that does not surprise me anymore is the consistency, and it's being disciplined, right? That Jocko, that discipline equals freedom thing. It's true. because when you can schedule it out and you don't really have to think about it sometimes, that's kind of the beauty in it. Like a deployment, right? Like I get up, we're on reverse schedule. So we sleep during the day, we're up all night. And so we get up at 5:30, 6 p.m. in the evening, get a little training in, get a little morning meeting, have some breakfast or dinner, which is always the worst meal of the day because it's just the worst meal of the day on the deployment. And then it's okay. Let's get to work. What are we doing on the training? What are we planning for? Do we have anything coming up on the board? Target wise, and once that's done, we go to mid-rats, right? So the midnight rations, and that's usually my favorite meal of the day. And then again, if we don't have anything planned, we go to the gym, right? And it's like simple. It's like, let's go to the gym. How can we get better? Can we go to the gym? And then we'll go back and stretch and hang out, maybe play a little video game, maybe watch a movie. Maybe I'll go back to the gym. Who knows? And then I'll go to dinner or breakfast. Right. And then at that time, it's like family time. We hang out with your boys. It's kind of like nothing's going on. The sun's starting to creep up. You're like, all right, I'm going to go read and watch a movie or go to sleep. Right. And it's just simple. There's no real room for the outside distractions. I'm with my brothers that I love and I'm doing something that I enjoy. Sure, I miss my wife. I miss my kids. I get homesick. That's probably my biggest weakness. I got homesick all the time. It's part of it, what it is. And I'm not afraid to admit that, but I loved it. You bitch and moan sometimes because you're not getting out enough or you're not doing the job and you're just dying in this land. But you look back on it and you're like, man, I miss it. It's just so simple. There's something beautiful about the simplicity of it.
Yeah. And so how did you get there? Because, most young men like myself sign up for the Army right out of high school or right out of college, or maybe they bounce around for a year or two, don't have a whole lot of direction. But I have to imagine, maybe Chris can look this up. I would be willing to bet 80% of enlisted men enlist in the military before they're 21 years old. That would have to be my guess. So what was it that you were searching for in life that you're like, yeah, you know what? Infantry at 28 years old. That sounds like a good plan. Hey, this quick interruption is brought to you by me, Scott Groves, the host of the On the Edge podcast. This podcast is brought to you by me. I'm a loan officer who can help you with a mortgage in all 50 states across the United States. I also coach loan officers. So if you are a home buyer who's looking to get a mortgage, if you're a realtor who's looking to partner with an awesome loan officer, or if you're a loan officer looking for coaching, get in touch with me. It's those sources of revenue that allow us to produce this podcast and get out a new episode to you every week for the last couple of years. So if you're looking for a mortgage, if you're looking for a mortgage lender to partner with, or you're looking for a mortgage coach, I'm your guy. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Yeah, I'm not the smartest guy. No, but I think there's a perfect storm of scenarios, right? So I was a freshman in high school when September 11th happened. It was, like I said, I'm an hour from the city, watching the smoke, for a month or so after, probably even more smolder. It has an effect on you You have family and friends who have family that are police, fire, or even work in those areas, just business wise. And you see all the people affected. And I think, also as a freshman, right, you're going through puberty, that testosterone's kicking in, and you're like, I need to defend my country, or we got punched in the face, and like, what are we going to do about it? So there's that part of it. I have both my grandfathers served at some point. Nothing crazy, but so it's in the blood, but they were also first generation Americans.
Mm.
So I think, but they were so proud to be an American. Like I remember my grandfather, he was born here in 1932, had to go over back. He's from Greece. His family is from Greece, had to go back to Greece. His mother had TB. So sent him over there at 4. World War II breaks out. He comes back as like a 16, 17-year-old man. And he loved being an American, and so he joined the Navy, and he got to school through that. And I just still remember, I spent a lot of time with him growing up, and I always remember him. He instilled a lot of the pride for this country that I grew up with. Um, Playing manhunt, I was always like the guy that like snuck up on people and like loved to do the sneaky things and try to get away with that. So it's always been a calling. Um, I then at 18, I tried to join. I did. I tried to join the Marines, and my father talked me out of it. He's like, listen, you have this opportunity to play college baseball. You have a scholarship. Why don't you do this? You can always go back when you get done as an officer, because his father was an officer, and his father talked him out of joining the military as well. Which I'm grateful for that one, because I'm glad I wasn't a Marine.
Yeah.
Um, we're all on the same team, but I'm glad I didn't go that route.
Yeah.
Um, and then at 24, again, I on my way out trying to figure it out. Am I going to go play baseball again, or am I going to go do something different? I had the itch again, and I had a serious girlfriend at the time. We are not together. Surprise, surprise. Who was basically like, "You're not doing it," and I'm glad that again, everything happens for a reason. Because who knows
Right.
if I would have ever met my wife at
Right.
that point if I did it then.
Who knows if you would have
Uh,
got dead?
right, or that, right, or who knows, right?
Right.
So at 28, I am living with my now wife. We're together for a year. We started living together, and I was in my 20s, in my early 20s, I was asleep. I've said this, like there was a hole in me. I was depressed. I didn't know what to do with myself. I started reading books like Spartan Up by Joe, what's his last name? Messina. And it kind of sparked me. It unleashed that primalness in me again that I had when I was a young kid in my early teens, and like that my ancestors were like, this is what you're supposed to do. And I remember having the conversation with Courtney, my wife, my girlfriend at the time, but was like, hey, I really kind of want to do this. And I don't want to do this in like just do it. I mean, I want to go join the Ranger Regiment. Like I did all my research on what units were doing what their mission statements were. And I was like, that's the unit I want to be a part of. I need to be a part of. And she's like, cool, I'm down. Let's do it. And so, you know, I realized pretty fast that the depression that I thought I had was just a lack of purpose.
Mm.
And that really, so that's pretty much the story of how this all kind of happened, and all the cards fell into place at the right time.
And what was appealing, because a lot of people don't understand that there's Ranger School and then there's Ranger Regiment. So correct me if I'm wrong, but Ranger School is, depending 4 to 6 months, if you get recycled or whatnot, or you get injured. And like, if you go through Ranger School, you get the cool little Ranger tab, and it shows that you're pretty freaking tough and you've been through this trial by fire. But then being assigned to Ranger Regiment, actually means you're part of like the first tier of special forces that's like, hey, when we need to go into a country and take over an airport to make sure that like we can land the rest of the good guys, yeah, you're going to be the first one pulling the trigger and shooting at shit when we go invade a country. Did I get that all more or less right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So basically, Ranger Regiment is the premier raid, airfield seizure, um, unit the Army has, right? So basically, I don't know how they're doing it now, but what my path was, I went to basic training, airborne school, and then Ranger assessment and selection process, or RASP, right? And it's about an 8-week program, barring recycle, whatnot. And it's a smoke fest. It's rucking, running, all the standards, right? The 5 mile, 12 mile land nav, and just getting smoked all the time, right? To get to hopefully get a scroll, right? Which is Ranger Regiment. So it's either first, second, third. There's RTB now, and or this the Special Troops Battalion, and then now they've created MI, so intelligence. And but those are, the Ranger Regiment. So what you were talking about first was being Ranger qualified, which is cool, right? Like it's all great. Nothing against it, but unless you have a scroll, you're not, like, people will be like, you're not a real Ranger. Whatever. I'm not going to
Right.
fight that fight right now, but because it's funny, like even to this day, sometimes my mom's like, "Oh, I met this guy and his son's a Ranger," and I'm like, "Cool, mom. Where is he stationed?" And he's like, "Hawaii." I'm like, "You're right. He's a real Ranger, right? Right?" Like she, it's just funny. It's funny who knows what, and because it can get confusing.
Right,
But
right. I mean, because technically you can be a cook and go through Ranger School, if there's the funding and you're tough enough.
yeah,
And then you go back to Fort Riley, Kansas, where you're serving food to a bunch of people, like where I was stuck in god awful center of the universe, it felt like. But it's very cool that they went through and they have that training and they have those
right,
leadership chops. But if you're really in Ranger Regiment, you're doing like the high speed stuff and you have the cool equipment and you're actually getting deployed with a mission of, I guess I would say, violence.
right.
I
I
mean,
mean,
that's the intention, right?
our mission statement is kill, capture, high value targets. Like that's what we do. We go in with 35 dudes, machine guns, goose rounds, and a lot of overhead help, and we go do our thing. And that was what we were doing for 20 years in Afghanistan.
So after you go through like the 8-week RASP Ranger Assessment Selection process,
Mhm.
do they basically just look at kind of this cadre of guys and be like, hey, based on what we saw, we want you to report to Ranger Regiment, and now you're just going to be an E1 or an E2. You're a private that's airborne
Right.
qualified. I mean, really, at this point, airborne school is 5 or 6 weeks. You've got whatever 12 weeks of basic training in AIT. You've got
Right.
8 weeks of you're only like 6 months into your military career, and they're like, yes, you're going to be one of the guys who's with
Right.
the guys.
So yeah, you go straight to majority of the time you go straight to your battalion. So I went straight from selection, whatever you want to call it, to First Ranger Battalion, which is in Savannah. I did, and here's the cool thing, slash, I don't know if it's cool or not, but I came in as a specialist because I was a college graduate.
Ah,
But
nice.
in Ranger Regiment, you are a private no matter what until you get your Ranger tab. You are considered a private until you get your Ranger tab.
I love this.
So you do all the private work no matter what, right? So I'm there with, a 17-year-old kid that we all graduated together with, who's bad or 18, whatever. He's a badass kid, but we're the same rank, right? We're
Right.
we're still privates. Whether I have a specialist E4 on my chest or he's got a little E1 mosquito wing, like we are still privates together.
Right.
Uh, which is great. It sets the bar of like, and it sets like basically what the standard is, right? And but what's cool about it is, at least the experience I had in the platoon that I was lucky enough to go to and spend my whole career with is the culture there was you you act like a man, you are good at your job, we will treat you like that. There was no like stupid, you know, dick and down games for no reason
Yeah,
ever.
no
It was
hazing or bullshit like that.
yeah, the hazing. I mean, the hazing's out of love, right? Like
Right,
seriously, like I don't no like unless it's like malicious, like and
right,
again, going through college, playing being in a locker room my whole life, I know the difference between what a malicious hazing is and what is like, hey, can you handle this?
right, right.
And I never took any of it for me as malicious hazing or whatnot. I thought it was like, all right, they're testing you. Like they want to know if they can trust you, if like they want to go and do things with you that not everybody wants to be a part of.
Yeah. Because
Like you want to go
what year are
like
you joining?
everybody wants to do hood rat shit till it's time to do hood rat shit, right? Like
Right.
so it's like they're testing you out.
And what year did you join?
2016. So toward like my first deployment was in 18. So it was like building up, building up, slowing down roller coaster ride
Yeah,
of
so I
what
mean, in 2016, figure September 11th happens, they send in a few Rangers or airborne or whatnot, but like the war doesn't really kick off till 2002, 2003. But you've got guys in your units that have seen 13 years of deployment.
yeah.
They've lost friends. They've probably done 5, 6 tours to Afghanistan and Iraq in some crazy shit. And now you're coming in as a 28-year-old. You probably look like a peer, but you're totally wet behind the ears, right? No experience. You've never been
Yep.
shot at in anger. Like, was that a weird juxtaposition where they're like, yeah, we get it. You're a man, but like, you haven't seen what we've seen. I mean, I've got like a little bit of a culture shock almost.
Yeah, it was. I think um, you know, it's tough, right? Because personally, me, I didn't deal with a lot of people my age, to be honest with you. All the people my age were like platoon sergeants, first sergeants higher, like
Right.
as I started growing up. So I was with a lot of like 20, 20, 25, maybe a 28-year-old here and there. Um, but again, I just carried myself like a man, and yeah, which at the end of the day bought me the credibility that they spent extra time teaching me.
Mm,
They spent the time to help me learn, to to give me the ability to fail, right? Like we all need to fail. Like that's the only way you learn.
right.
And I screwed shit up all the time. But because I also loved it, like I truly loved it in the sense of I was working on it all the time. I was working on it when I was at home. I was working on, my room clearing at home. I was working on my breaching at home. Like I would teach things that I learned at work to my wife to help me practice teaching.
Right.
And for me to understand what I was doing better. So like my wife is it's funny as I became like a team leader and doing the squad leader position, my wife would know how to do do a breacher's assessment better than half my specialists because of how many times I made her do it with me.
That's awesome. You're like, honey, I need you to hide in the house. I'm going to clear the room and find you. You're going to play terrorist. I'm going to play ranger.
Yeah.
Like, man, your wife sounds like a champ. So tell,
She's the toughest woman I know. Like she puts me in my place all the time. She's great.
That's awesome. And what does a ranger platoon look like? Because
Mhm.
I was an infantry guy. I was a mortarman. Then I got stuck in Fort Riley, Kansas for 3 years before everything went crazy. So like we had a very different structure. We were just one small platoon that supported an entire battalion. And basically it's infantry guys doing all the bitch work for a bunch of tankers. That's kind of how Fort Riley, Kansas works. But what does a real infantry platoon, you mentioned you were there with 30, 35 guys and you served in that
Yep.
platoon for your entire 6 years. What does the structure of a, combat ready ranger platoon look like?
Yeah, so we usually it depends on the manning. But most of the time we're rocking the line squad. So there's three line squads, one weapon squad. The weapon squad is usually three. They'll either be 240s, 240 Limas, or they'll rock 48s, like which is like a 7.62 saw.
Hmm.
So it's lighter, but it's still a 7.62.
That's a lot of firepower.
Yeah, and then they'll also have usually an assistant gunner, which carries all the ammo for them. Um,
Fuck that job, by
and
the way.
maybe two. What's
I
that?
said, fuck that job. That's got to be the worst job in the
Yeah,
army.
yeah.
Being the
That
assistant
was
gunner in a ranger
that
platoon.
was my first job as a private. Okay, I did my first MLAT, which is the airfield seizure training as a gunner with a tremendous amount of weight jumping out of a plane. Like not the funnest thing ever, and I don't miss that. Um, the a weapon squad will also have a goose gunner.
I don't
Uh,
know what a goose gunner is.
so it's like it's a Carl Gustav recoilless rifle. Basically, it's a bazooka that you can keep putting more ammo in.
Oh, okay. So it's like carrying a mortar tube on your shoulder.
Correct.
Perfect.
Correct. It's 84, millimeters. Um, this is a shell from one of them,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a more heavy shit. So you don't want to be the goose gunner or the assistant goose gunner either.
or the assistant goose gunner, right? And plus, you're getting crushed by overpressure every day. Every time that thing goes off, so that your insides hurt at the end of that day. Um, And then the three line squads, they're running like 3 to 5 man teams, two teams, and then one squad leader.
Interesting.
So there'll be the Alpha, Bravo, and then squad leader.
And
And they have what's that?
go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and they have usually two saw gunners in the squad, um, two grenadiers. As a team leader, I also carried like a grenadier, a grenade launcher just in like my dump pouch, just in case I need to send a little extra just from the hip here. Um, and then we would also have what's called like an advanced ranger first responder. So that guy will basically be the bridge between like a basic dude who just knows like the first bits of like stop the massive hemorrhage, airway maybe at the most, to like then our badass soccer medics that like do unreal things on the battlefield. They're phenomenal. Those guys are. I don't care what anyone says. Ranger medics are the best medics in the world. Um, but in between we would have like an infantry guy. Like I did this at one point, who would they took away my saw. I went to extra medical training. It's like about 2 to 3 week course. IVs, crikes, chest tubes, all these extra things that I could do in the case of like the medics doing something, dealing with some things, or he needs a little extra help. It's just kind of like a floater position. I really actually enjoyed that position. It was a lot of fun. I got a lot of great work in during there. So
And when you're training as like this 35 man ish team, like obviously taking over airfields, okay, you jump out of a plane, you land on the airfield, you secure it and pull security. But like what other missions are you training for in like the work up to, I saw a couple pictures of you at Bagram Air Force Base, so I'm guessing you're out there trying to capture some bad guys. Like what is it? Is it the stuff you see on TV where it's, I don't know, clearing buildings and it's door to door? Or is it really like, hey guys, you're going to be the pack horses that put on, thousands of pounds of gear and walk up this mountain to set up a observation post or something? Like, what are you guys actually training for in the Ranger Battalion?
So our mission statement is capture kill. So we're training depending on what the terrain is, right? It could be, it could be in Iraq and like in a city setting where we're going door to door doing that thing, or we could be in Afghanistan and it's in a compound in the middle of some valley, right? Or it could be a compound with you know random pop-up tents all of a sudden that are there that you didn't see the night before. And so those are types of like the scenarios that we train for. Knowing where we're going is huge because that tells us what size ladders we need to bring to look over the wall, things like that, or what the weather, or how much water am I going to bring, because the southern part of Afghanistan is way more humid than the northern part. So like, am I going to bring more water tonight? um so things like that, like, but the training will look like something like a training build up to a deployment will look something like we'll do team live fire. So just your team leader and you are going in rooms, right? You're practicing, you're entering and clearing rooms. We'll do a squad live fire. So it's, same thing, but now it could be indoors, it could be outdoors, it could be maybe a little bit of both. And then your platoon live fire. So this is, think of it like, it's growing, right? So you go
Right.
from small, medium, big, and that's, what we'll do is we'll do a day iteration blank. We'll do a day iteration live rounds. Then we'll do a night iteration blank and then a night iteration live rounds. So it's building. You're always growing. You're always seeing where you need to work on things. Historically, night blank is the worst run of the day, because just you got through a day blank and it was like pretty good. And then the day live, everybody's jacked up for.
Right.
And you crush it because you could see everything. And then night live is like you probably had dinner a little bit. So like you're kind of like settling into the food and you're like losing a little bit of that killer instinct because you're going back to blank and you put the nods back on and you're like, I can't see shit again, especially if you're a new private.
Yeah.
And then you're like, all right, you get your dick kicked in, and all right, now it's time to go. It's night live. Like this is what we do. This is we run our missions at night, so we better crush this.
Yeah,
Um,
a couple things you said there, the nods, the night vision goggles. Ladies and gentlemen who have never put on a set of night vision goggles, it is not like the movies. You have no depth perception. The shit is not nearly as clear as they make it seem on the movies. Like, in the movies, it's like, there's a twilight. Then you put your goggles down and it's crystal clear and you can see all far away. And James Bond can kill anybody because the detail is perfect. It's like, I remember driving in night vision goggles, and it's the most terrifying thing I've ever done. Because with like no distance perception, you can't tell if you're going 5 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour. It's horrific. I can't imagine getting into a
what
live firefight with night vision goggles on.
what's even crazier to me is the helicopter pilots that fly us in and out in night vision
It's
goggles.
bonkers.
They are amazing. They are amazing. They are the best pilots in the world. It's crazy. It's and being plugged in, like when you listen to them on the radio, it's the scariest thing in the world because they'll be like talking about what they had for lunch or dinner, and then like they kind of get and they're just beep bopping, talking like having nonsense conversations, and then they'll go quiet, or then something serious happens. You're like, are we gonna crash? What's going on? Why are you guys not messing around anymore? And like, I can't. I have to unplug and not listen to them anymore. So,
So talk a little bit
um,
about that because, obviously for, the benefit of movies, so many of these movies, firefights, whatever, they all happen during the day, right? But like you said,
mhm.
all your missions you ran at night, right? Because you want the enemy to be fatigued. And we do have night vision goggles, so we have hopefully the benefit of like some tactical benefits working in the evening. Tell us a little bit about like running missions at night, or what is that? I mean, it just all sounds so terrifying.
Well, that's the point. We want to be terrifying to them,
Right.
right? But like, it's just like anything else. Once you get the reps, it's it's reps. It's more reps. It's more reps. Like I would take brand new privates out for walks in the woods and make them sign their nods out, and we're gonna go for a walk at 5 o'clock in the morning. Like, because that's the only way you get good at it is just walking and getting used to it. So it takes time, right? And like in these train ups too, we also we'll do like a TFT or a FMPs where so basically practice missions of what we're doing, and they're majority of the time at night.
Right.
So again, it's it's the mindset too. It's like this is what I wanted to do, right? So it could be terrifying, but that's what makes people brave, right? You can't be brave if you're not scared. I tell my 4-year-old this all the time. I'm like, hey man, like he's like, Daddy, I'm scared. I'm like, that's okay. You're allowed to be scared, right? That's how we become brave is by overcoming that fear, right? I'm proud that you're telling me this, but daddy used to do all these things too, and he was terrified all the time, and that's okay, but you still do them.
Right.
And I think, we get a lot of credit for what we do, but we're human too. And it's just the ability of putting that fear into and using it and that nerves and using them for good instead of for shutting down.
Mhm.
Right. And that's a skill, just like anything else. And I love working at night, even to this day. Like, I'll walk around the woods at night. It's my favorite thing. We went camping last summer, and my wife and I are walking back from like the lake to the camper, and she's like, "How do you know where you're going?" I'm like,
Practice.
babe, how many times do I walk? How many times have I walked around in the night with, my life in the last 8 years or 7 years, whatever you want to call it? And she's like, I know, I know, I know. And I'm like, so again, back to the original question, it's reps, right? We work at it. It's being consistent at your skill, at your craft, and knowing and trusting that everybody else that you're doing it with has the same amount of effort and love and passion for what you do. And you know, transitioning to the Apogee, like, that's what I wanted out of Apogee, was to be surrounded by men like us again,
Yeah. And
that you can trust.
going back, I'm thinking of like, did you ever end up going to Ranger School, or were you just at Ranger Regiment the whole time? Okay, you did.
Yeah, so to go to stay in Ranger Regiment, you have to go through Ranger School at some point.
Got it.
You can never, like, there's a certain time frame that if you don't go to Ranger School and graduate, you get kicked out and sent
Got
back
it.
to the big army.
So
So you have to go.
you've got basic training, you've got airborne school. It just gets progressively harder, right? Then you go through Ranger School, then you do some type of 12, 18 week workup to get ready to deploy. So by the time you deployed and you're now responsible for other people's lives, and they expect you to perform, how much training time total did you have from like day one in the army until you're landing in country in Afghanistan, and like
Yeah.
you have to be ready to pull the trigger with a purpose?
So for me, everybody's a little different. Everybody's timeline tends to be different. I joined in January of 16. I got on my first deployment March of 18.
Yeah. So
So
you had like a solid 2 years of training.
I had a solid 2 years. Now, I was supposed to deploy the summer of 17. The literally 3 days before that deployment, a kid came back from Ranger School, and they kicked me off the manifest and took him.
Oh,
So but a buddy of mine who was a private at the time went.
yeah.
So it just happened to be like, they're like, "Hey, you're ready to be a leader, so you're going to go to Ranger School instead of deployment." I'm like, "I'd rather go to deployment. Ranger School is not going anywhere."
Right.
But I didn't get that choice, and they said that's what happened.
Do you remember what it was like the first couple times that you went out? Like, are the guys that have a lot of experience, are they like putting you in the back and you're like the redheaded stepchild for a few missions? Or it's like, hey man, you're part of the team, you've done the training, we're living together, we trained together, and it's like, this is just the thing. Do you remember the first couple times that you went out on a live mission?
I will tell you, by the time I got to go, because I was 2 years in, um, I was being humble but being confident about this. I was really good at my job,
Mhm.
and my team leader knew that, and my squad leader knew that, and they trusted me. So they're like, "Hey, you're in the show now. Let's go." And they trusted me with their lives, and I thank them, and I gained so much confidence from that. Like, I knew I was good, but feeling their energy, I could tell that I was really good. And you know, I was supposed to be a ranger.
Mhm.
Like, that's just the way I feel about it. I loved it. I lived it, and it was a phenomenal time in my life.
Yeah. It's interesting that it's kind of a virtuous cycle, right? Because those gentlemen that you just mentioned were clearly good leaders because they gave you the borrowed confidence for you to be better, which meant they knew that they were better, they had somebody that had their back, that was in a better mental state because they let you borrow the confidence, which probably gave them more confidence, which then allowed you to have more borrowed confidence. It's like, it's a virtuous cycle of like good leadership, right?
Right. And that cycle's powerful, right? Because it could be a negative cycle too. And it's your choice to make that a positive or a negative. And the people that surround you are, do that as well.
Yeah. I've got a weird question, and feel free to answer or tell me to piss off. But, by 2016, 2018, it wasn't 2001, like when 9/11 happened. It wasn't everybody flying American flags. We've now got 12 years of political division, right? We're about to go into the Trump era where political division is at its all-time height. Were you able to completely separate, like, hey, I want to be a Ranger, there's a mission, these are my boys, and like all that other stuff is all that other stuff? Or did any of the political infighting or the criticism over the mission creep and the stuff going in Iraq and Afghanistan and the Bush lied, people died, does any of that creep into your brain? Or are you just like, this is where I want to be, this is the job I'm going to do? Or is there any of that political stuff where you're sitting around the base being like, man, we're not really doing our mission because of this politician or this infighting? What is that like, having now, come into active service and coming into your own much later in the war, when it's not all esprit de corps, America, we got to kick them back in the teeth?
Right. Yeah. So I'd say the only time I ever felt that was when, like you said, we didn't get to do our job, when we were stood down or we're walking out to a helicopter and, hey, we're not going anymore. It got turned down. Other than that, man, I was in my own ecosystem. We were in our own ecosystem. The world didn't matter to me at all. All that mattered was my wife, my kids when they came, and my brothers that I worked with, like my best friends. Like, I got so entrenched and so immersed in that lifestyle and world that, like, I didn't talk to my family a lot. I couldn't. They didn't understand. They couldn't understand. They couldn't understand the preciousness of time when you have it to spend it with your wife or your child. They couldn't understand that everything, because this is also a time where I'm understanding how to schedule better my life and be more disciplined. They didn't understand like that value system. They didn't understand that, like, at any given time, like throughout a year, right? My job is, we're on a 0 through 100 work callback. So that means that certain times throughout the year, I can be called and be anywhere in the world in 18 hours. So my family had no idea. Like, there would be times where my wife had to say that that I was in the shower when they FaceTimed or called, because I had left for somewhere that no one was supposed to know.
Right.
And they couldn't make that connection. So to me, all that did for me was, I'm going to be really good at my job. I'm going to be a really good, father, husband, teammate. And that's it.
Yeah.
And so everything else, the politics, the world, like the weather, it didn't matter.
Right. Yeah, because I've read about this before in just, this is public knowledge. It's on Wikipedia, so it's not like there's any trade secrets here. But it's like, at any given time, there are certain units, to your point, that if the beeper goes off, I'm dating myself here. If the cell phone notification goes off, it's like, you have to get to base, you have to get with your unit, you have to get geared up, load all the pallets that are pre-packed onto a giant plane, and you have to be ready to take over. I mean, historically speaking, in the 80s or 90s, the airport in Panama or Nicaragua within 100 hours, because you got to lay the way for the siege of the rest of the quote unquote big army and the regular military. And like, how wild is that when you're out just like having a drink? And I'm sure they did this as like a test a couple times in your career. You're out having a beer, you're in barbecue mode, you're like, I don't know, you're watching like Terminator 2 or something, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, the phone went off. We might be going to invade Venezuela, and I'll see you when I see you, honey. Like, How weird is that?
So I have two stories. My son, he's 4. His birthday is January 7th, and he's our first. We, so it's 2019 New Year's Eve. That's the whole Soleimani thing,
Yeah.
Trump. So
I
my
killed him
son
like a
is
dog. I killed him like a dog. Like,
killed him like a dog,
yeah.
right? So um we get a fake call that morning, New Year's Eve morning. We all come in and it's like, hey, we just want to make sure you guys are all in town, like not drinking, not getting in trouble. It's New Year's Eve. Go home. They do a bag dump, check, make sure you're packed the right way. Go home. So I call my wife. She's now our due date is around, she's on today, like that's her due date. And um she's like, hey, I'm like, hey, you want anything to eat? I'm on my way home. So I pick up lunch and we're eating, sitting at the table eating, and my phone goes off again, and it's my squad leader. He's like, you got to come back. Like, it's real. He's like, and you know how you know it's real is they tell you to take out cash.
Uh,
And so I'm driving back. My wife's driving me back because we know, like, I'm not going to there's no reason to take my car to base.
right.
And it's the hardest car ride to the base that we get. And because I know I'm leaving and she's pregnant and my son is like the due date or the due date's the first or whatever. And I say goodbye. I love you. And I'm like kind of I'm breaking down, she's breaking down. I can feel I don't know what to do. I kind of just get out of the car and go into work. And I'm like, I don't know what the fuck's going on. So I just immerse myself in work and I start packing and I start figuring out my stuff and making the plans and we get an intel report. I'm like, oh man, this could be like the first tick of the real next big thing. And um I get called into the company commander's office like 10 minutes later and he's like, you're not going. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you're not going. I'm like, come on. Like, and I'm like arguing with him when I'm like, internally, I'm like, yes, but no, but yes, because I don't want to leave the boys but I don't want to leave my wife. And it's like he did me the best thing anyone has ever done by not giving me the decision. He goes, listen, I missed the birth of my first son, and my wife would kill me if I let this happen to you and your wife. And so it was rough. I stayed there, watched them leave. That was one of the worst things I've ever had to watch, was like those guys get on a plane and leave. And I was a wreck for like 3 days, maybe even longer, because she didn't go into labor till the 6th, but I was glued to like whatever was going on. And until she went into labor, and then I went from like, oh, they're okay. Like now I'm all being about being a dad.
Yeah.
And it was probably one of the most stressful weeks of my life.
Probably. I mean, Jesus Christ. I'm thinking, like, for people that haven't served in the military or had close family that served in the military, I mean, just think of the flood of emotions of like your first, the people that are listening to this that haven't served, like the shit like our military and their family goes through. You're getting ready for the birth of your first son. You get called up on a deployment. You're not some low speed refueling unit. Like if you guys are going out in an emergency, the shit's gonna hit the fan. You had to have been thinking as you're getting out of that car, fuck man, is this where they get me? And I never even meet my son, or my wife gives birth to a son and she's a widow. Like, I mean, all of this shit's got to be going through your head. And then 2 hours later, they're like, nah, you're not going. So now you're like, well, I'm pumped for me, but now I don't get to support my boys and like make sure they come home alive. And then you're having the birth of like, fuck, dude, you're lucky you didn't have a heart attack or a stroke or something.
What's even funnier is like about 6 months later, maybe even a year, we get another one of those messages, right? And my mom is flying in. And so I am on the way, we're on the way to picking her up from the airport. And she can't get, they're not letting them off the plane or whatever. They're deboard, like there's something's wrong with the plane. They're not letting them off the plane. And I'm like getting calls from like my squad leader at the time. He's like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "Listen, I had to walk into the airport and tell them that they needed to let this woman off the plane because I had to go on a no notice deployment."
So
And
wild, man.
it's the craziest things ever.
And in those no notice deployments where, you got 100 hours, a lot can change politically in 100 hours.
Correct.
Not you specifically or not giving away any information that you're not supposed to, but have you heard of, they do that, everybody gets on the plane, you take off, and within that 100 hours things get resolved and you're like, "All right, cool, I'm on my way back home. Didn't have to get shot at this week." I have to imagine that happens, right? Cuz a lot politically can change in 100 hours.
Yeah, so it does happen, and sometimes they'll call us in when it looks like something might happen, and just to give us a little bit more time of prepping. But it's again, it's sometimes it's like it's like, "Oh, here comes another fake one," like, or here's like another like you guys are blowing the whistle too early type thing,
Yeah.
and so it's a lot of up and down roller coaster rides.
Yeah.
Understanding your emotion and your emotional energy, and dealing with the highs and lows really like it taught me a lot, that like little things like that I didn't understand that I would learn. I learned,
Mhm.
which was really cool.
And so 2018, you get to Afghanistan. What's that like? Is it like, in advance, hey, we're going to be here for a 6-month rotation. We're going to go get a bunch of bad
Yeah.
guys. This is who we're going to work
So
with.
that one 2018 was actually to Iraq.
Oh, to Iraq.
Um, yeah, and it was they were trying something new. We did 5 months. Usually so Ranger Regiment historically, this isn't like a secret. For the 20 years was 8 months training, 4 months deployed. 8 months training, 4 months deployed. Or three, whatever, 100 or 90 something days. For whatever reason they wanted to change it up that cycle. We did a 5 month deployment and a little longer training, which they went straight back to 4 month deployments after that. So again, I enjoyed it. It was it's simple. You get to do the things you love to do with some of the guys you love the most. Um and you get in really good shape.
Yeah. I saw a picture of you on the airfield and you were pretty jacked
Yeah.
up. What by 2018, we're past the surge, the John McCain
Mhm.
surge, where things are getting better or worse depending on your perspective. What was the operational tempo like? Were you guys going
Yeah.
out every night, or was it more like, hey, pull guard duty this month, you're going to be
It
okay?
it wasn't an every night thing. Um Maybe it ebbs and flows,
Yeah.
honestly. It Without getting too much detail, it depends on the appetite for what's going on. The loom cycle plays a huge role, right? For those of you that don't, for what the loom cycle is how bright the moon is,
Oh,
because we operate at night. So we ended up we would tend to operate more when the moon is not as bright.
right. That makes sense.
Now it depends if it's a time sensitive thing, that doesn't matter. But
Right.
if we have the ability to plan it out and we know where the guy is and he's staying there, we'll wait for the moon cycle to be less light. So it's easy, so it's harder for them to see, easier for us to see. Um and then yeah, we were and that deployment again, it's not a secret. We were going after ISIS a lot. So we were crossing the border and going to Syria and going after ISIS a lot.
Yeah.
Um
I had a
so it
long
was
I had a long conversation with a buddy of mine who does not want to be on the podcast for some political reasons and whatnot, maybe in a couple years. Did you prefer going in by Humvee or helicopter? We had like a 4-hour conversation about Humvee versus helicopters. Well, this gets you there faster, but there's a much, much better chance you're getting shot at in the air, and if you crash, you die. You can crash a Humvee and survive. I don't know. We had like a 4-hour conversation about Humvee versus helicopter. How did you like to go into battle when the cavalry song goes on?
Oh, there's nothing more badass than a helicopter.
Okay.
But I will say I agree with a lot of his cons on the helicopter.
Yeah, there's no walking away from a helicopter accident. You're pretty much
No,
done.
there's very little. And an in-air refuel is one of the scariest things you'll ever be a part of.
Explain. I've never been in a helicopter.
So an in-air refuel is we're in a helicopter going, a good distance, and we're running low on gas. So they will have a plane fly in front of the helicopter. The plane has to slow down, the helicopter speed up. They set out, that line, and the helicopter is going to send the male end into the female end of the rope or the line that's coming out of the plane and get more gas so that we can continue on our mission. And
I've watched this on YouTube, and it's the craziest shit you've ever seen. Like, whoever designed this, where they're like, okay, guys, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put a giant flying gas station in the air over enemy territory. And then we're going to drop a hose that's just dangling out the back of the plane going 200 miles an hour. And then you're going to fly up and you're going to fuck the hose and you're going to refuel your gas tank mid-air. And we're going to pray that nobody catches on fire.
At night with no lights.
This sounds not fun.
It sounds unreal.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it. I'm sitting on the door of a 60. So the 60s have, my legs are like you would be hanging off the dock at a lake. Your legs are just hanging out in the middle of the open air, moving at hundreds of miles an hour in a helicopter. And I'm sitting down, kind of in it, kind of out of it, like going over the mission, what's going on in my head, like kind of what we're doing. And all of a sudden, I see this shark fly through the air. And that's what my mind is like, oh, it's a goddamn shark in the air. I had to like look up and be like, oh no, we're still in the air. There's the moon. And it was this plane coming in underneath the clouds. And I'm like, oh, we're about to do an in-air refuel. This is going to suck. And it's just the helicopter speeds up. It gets choppy. It's like trying to figure out how to get it in. And the whole time I'm just like, please let this be okay.
Oh man. So how many tours did you do? And then, what made you decide to get out?
So I did 2 enlistments, multiple deployments, and I think the final straw, whatever you want to talk about, was the pullout of Afghanistan. Some other things that I don't really want. It's not a point. And my wife said it's time. And, she was on this ride with me the whole time. Like, we got married between airborne. I jumped out of a plane Friday in airborne school for the 5th time ever. Went to the courthouse after, got married, eloped the next day. And then I went to selection on Monday. So like, we were together. She's the trooper. We were together this whole time. And she was like, hey, it's time. And I said, okay.
I've read Tim Kennedy's book and watched his documentary on the debacle, which was the exit from Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even conceptualize the lack of morale after seeing something like that. I have to be very careful here. I have a good friend who's very high up in the same world that you were in. And he's like, Scott, man, he's like, I don't get it. Like, he's an officer. I have drawn up plans on like an emergency exit. This is what you do. A squad full of guys and a couple plasma torches, you can destroy $1 billion of equipment in a couple days. And so he's like, I'm not in a place to call it ignorance or arrogance or it was nefarious, but like the whole way that thing went down, there's no script in the military manual for it to go that bad.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, can you speak to what morale or the feeling was to be in the military when that shit goes down?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sucks, right? Like that's you feel like you're being let down and whatnot.
Mhm.
But the other way I look at it too, and in the morale sense, right? Especially I can only talk about this from like a low enlisted leader, Ranger Regiment guy, right? Like a squad leader, team
Yeah, you're not
leader,
working at the Pentagon, but
area, right? I'm not make up there making decisions and whatnot. But what I can tell you about those guys, they want to do their fucking job. So because the training won't slow down, right? Because you still have to be ready for whatever the next thing is. But when you train that hard all the time and you don't get to go do your job for real, that's like training, doing 2 days all summer long for football, doing your workup, your film every week. You're getting your shit smoked in for practice in the summer and all that. And just to find out every Friday your game's canceled.
yeah,
Like, what is like, and it's like, that's the morale issue. And I could see that being an issue. And and when I said getting out of Afghanistan, do I believe that we should be in Afghanistan that long? I don't know. That's not for me to say, right?
right,
But my thing for me to say was, if I'm not going to go have a chance or a shot to go do the real thing, what am I sacrificing all this time, energy, effort, right, for? Because
yeah,
what I recently realized, and this is a recent thing for me, is the toll on your nervous system, on your brain, on your body, the training takes on you, right? So we all talk about the real life things and the injuries from real world scenarios and all that kind of stuff. But what people don't talk about much is like a ton of people die in training.
yeah,
And not to mention, you still get beat up. Like you're
right,
still carrying weight, you're still falling. And your nervous system, right? Your central nervous system, your brain doesn't know the difference between a real thing and a fake thing. They sound the same.
right,
I'll never forget my first training mission. I was like, they had people speaking the language. They had actors on that spoke the language that wherever we were supposed to be. Like they had real live explosives going off, and it was the most stressful thing I've ever been a part of in my life. And I asked my squad leader at the time, who had talked about being on multiple combat deployments, multiple missions. I'm like, hey Sarge, like, is this how it always is normally in real life? He's like, hell no, dude, this was harder than most of them. And I'm
right,
like, and I'm like, okay. And it didn't hit me. It hit me 8 years later, 9 years later. I was like, your central nervous system just takes a toll. It's like a shock factor, and like it doesn't, and because it doesn't know the difference between it being real or fake.
right,
Like it doesn't. Like it's like you running on a treadmill, right? You don't know the difference. Your brain doesn't know the difference between you running on a treadmill for a workout or you're running from a saber-toothed tiger because it's your ancestors back in like the Stone Ages. Like
right,
it doesn't know the difference.
right, right. Man, yeah, I don't want to say this facetiously or comically because people lost their lives, but I remember seeing some commentator who was specifically talking about the Rangers and the fall of Bagram Air Force Base, and he's like, if only the U.S. military had a specialized unit whose whole missions was to take over and secure fucking airfields. He's like, if only that existed, right? And he's like losing his mind. I think they even cut him off of CNN or something because he was using the F word. And he was like, this is unacceptable. Like we have some of the best trained soldiers in the military whose only job is to land at an Air Force base, take it over, secure it, and make sure the good guys don't die. And just the exit from there, like I can't imagine being part of that unit and seeing an airfield fall like that and be like, man, if we would have only got the word, we could have done this so much better. And we didn't need to have this debacle.
Well, I can tell you right now that I know the people that were there that shut it down. That they were the last Rangers on Bagram when they left. They were the last Americans there. And then I can tell you within 2 months, we were getting sit reps and warnos about us jumping back in. They never happened, but we were getting the warnos for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy, man. What do you, I mean, I know you're not you're not particularly political, and like you said, your time there was like you were pulling the trigger and you were a grunt. So you weren't working at the Pentagon or whatnot. But do you have any opinion on what the legacy of being in Iraq and Afghanistan is, or like, are you proud of some of the good work we did there, or is it just compartmentalized to like, hey man, my guys got home alive. That's all I could hope for. Like what's your kind of post-mortem on the whole thing as somebody who served there?
So I think it's tough, right? Because you talk about legacy and you talk about all these things. And as an American, I hope that our legacy is that we have made America safer. Talk about the whole world and democracy in Iraq or whatever. Like it to me, that's not the thing, right? It's I wanted to do this because the freshman boy in me and 13, 14-year-old boy in me was like, this is what you should be proud of and what you would have done for watching those buildings and that you're being your city. But when I think about legacy, it's like I don't think about that. It's a job, right? It was a job for me, and what I care about more is how I left the regiment, was how I left my platoon. Did I leave it better than I found it? And I can personally say that I did. I know that I helped change the culture, especially in my platoon. The things I'm most proud of are that there are guys that are leaders there now that are going on and hopefully doing bigger and better things that worked for me, and they are still and they're teaching the things that I taught them. And I mean this full-heartedly as a baseball coach, as a Ranger leader. I care more about making them better men than anything else. Because I know that if I made them better men, they would be better baseball players or they would be better Rangers. And that to me is the legacy that I wanted to leave.
So that's a perfect way to think about transitioning into what you're doing in the civilian world, right? It's like you find the Apogee Men's Group, you're part of the founding class. You're now getting into performance coaching. I know you have a sports coaching background. So it's like, if I was looking for a performance coach and I was like, oh, like high-level baseball player, Army Ranger, which is like the whole goal there is they create leaders. And then, now you're in a men's group that is all focused on like, hey, how can we bring in the best version of ourselves as men to serve our family and our business and our community and whatever else you're ready to start up, And so talk a little bit about that civilian transition. And you kind of alluded to it, like part of this is you wanted to find your tribe again, right?
Yeah.
And then tell me about, the journey from here on out.
Yeah. So obviously the hardest part for transitioning kind of kicked me in the mouth, honestly. I didn't think it'd be so hard. But losing that brotherhood and that like purpose, I didn't lose the purpose completely. I still got to be a father. I still get to be a husband every day. Like that's my purpose right now.
Mm-hmm.
But losing the brotherhood and being around men that you trust was huge. I'm grateful for Apogee for that, and it's put me around those kind of men again. And I get to meet you, and this is and it's really cool. It's really because you never know, right?
Right.
There's no coincidences in life. For me, the journey was I did an internship at West Point, and I got to work in their Center of Enhanced Performance, where I got to basically work with they have a bunch of PhDs there that help with sports psychology. It's open to all the cadets, but it was mostly the athletes went. And it was all about visualization, how to make good decisions with not a lot of information in a timely fashion,
Hmm.
um, how to meditate properly, how to, bring your level back down to baseline when you get a state of arousal or stimulus that takes you off course. Um, the coolest thing was that what I learned there from them was things that I was already doing. And I was like, oh, this just validated me, which was really cool. Um, I then got a job with a startup out of LA that worked with high level executives, athletes, things like that, where I'd get their blood work, I'd have a conversation, I'd get their whole day, what their habits are like, what's their goals, and I would create the best way to optimize their health and performance for them. Um, that's this is my favorite thing now is building rapport with people and helping them create the best versions of themselves because my mission now is I want to create the next great generation and the one after that. And how
Yeah.
and I want to be a part of that. And how does that happen? It happens with you and me as fathers, right? And then teenagers and helping them become, giving them the skills and to empower them with those things so that they can go on and be great men and great fathers as well and keep passing it down like what used to happen.
Right.
And I think that's what we're missing, and that's what I want to be a part of, and that's what I believe Apogee is doing, and the schools, the men's group, the young men, like that's what it is.
And where do you see this going for you? Do you envision yourself doing group coaching, dad's retreats? Like what's on
Yeah,
the radar for your business model?
yeah. So for me, I'm going to affiliate with I'm affiliating with Apogee, so I'm going to be one of their first certified coaches. Do also doing live events. They're going to be hosting live events throughout the country. I plan on being a coach there for those. Um, and then I also plan on doing one-on-ones, small groups maybe, but I really enjoy getting to know the guy I'm working with, the client,
Mhm.
whatever you want to call it. And you know, I don't want to say I pigeonhole myself into one, niche, but really believe that the high performing father, the guy who crushes it at work or in the gym, who has a high stressful job, but just doesn't know how to quite transition into being a dad or a husband and like whatever that looks like. Is that do you work from home? Is that walking through this doorway?
Mhm.
Is that for me when I was in the regiment was that's a 5 minute drive home, 10 minute drive home. How do I get myself out of that super alpha male community and culture into being like the loving, caring father and husband on this
Right.
drive home so that I can show up for them the best way, right? Because like Ranger Chris, my wife doesn't want that guy.
Right.
My wife wants the loving, caring, compassionate Chris.
Wait, your wife doesn't want capture kill Chris? What?
Right? And it's vice versa, right? And like my teammates don't want that dude that I'm with my wife or
Right.
my son, right? So how do we transition in these spaces? And through the years and through some skills I've learned what has worked in working with some of my buddies and talking to them too. Um, what I'm also passionate about is guys who want to perform better, right? Whether it's a surgeon in operation, whether it's you on a podcast, it's an athlete or a CEO who's got to give a big speech, right? Like what are some skills that we can learn to perform better? And I think through some mindset and visualization and things like that we can get down into the nitty gritty. I know like I'm really good at helping people perform better. And then lastly, the last thing is like unshakable confidence, right? Like I don't care who you are, if you are Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Derek Jeter, or anyone else, we all go through ups and downs. Like we all struggle with confidence. You can be the most confident man in the world. You're still going to go through lows.
Yeah.
And how do you build that confidence where it's like, man, I'm struggling right now. but I still got this to hang my hat on, and I know I'm going to show up tomorrow, and it's just one of those days, right? And that's a skill just like anything else. And those are the things that I've picked up along the way that I know I can help men become better, or young men, or anyone for that matter.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I think about, man, I wish I could give credit to whoever said this. I heard it on a podcast. It was probably a guest on Hal Elrod's podcast or John Vroman with Front Row Dads. And he said, he was talking about this idea of like this work-life balance that all these, 22-year-old life coaches on Instagram talk about. And he's like, yeah, it's really crazy because like you have the work-life balance people, and then you have just the hustle porn. Grind, 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 sell your company, and then, go fuck a bunch of strippers and do a bunch of cocaine on your private jet, right? It's like, it's just crazy that these are the two kind of verticals in advertising for coaching. And what he was saying is like work-life balance is kind of bullshit. Because like if you're all in on family, then you're all in and you're out of balance on work. And then if it's a season of like grinding, and because you got to grow your business or you got to generate enough revenue to take care of your family, family time is not in balance because you're building the business. And the term that he had come up with or he was trying to coin was like work-life transitions. Exactly what you're saying. That 5-minute drive home, how can you go from being if this is what needs to be in your life, the 20-hour entrepreneur that was just grinding to death to try to build the thing to provide for your family, but now you got to bring the energy down and you've got to ask better questions and you got to be emotionally available, like those transitions. And I thought it was such a beautiful way of thinking about it because it's like, yeah, there's times when the family is way more important. There's times when I'm selfish and I'm just more important. But how do you transition between the two so that when I get home, I'm not staring at my phone and disrespecting, my wife and my kids, which is something I really struggle with. So yeah, everything you're saying just kind of reinforces this idea of what he was talking about is like, where are these moments of transition where you're basically turning into a better version of yourself for the upcoming situation. That's great stuff.
Right. And it really is. And it's something that I think is overlooked, right? Like, because when you're, like you said, a high performing entrepreneur, or just going back to the army conversation, like, I could be gone for 2 weeks training, right? So like there is no work life balance there, right? I'm working for 2 weeks, but when I'm home, I am where my feet are, right? And that's being intentional and understanding like what's the priority in that moment. Because if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's going down to the scheduling. It's being appreciative and understanding that this is my time period to be the family man. So it's time to like detach, you know, whether that is compartmentalized, detach, whatever you want to call it. But I'm here. This is where I'm at right now. So I'm gonna give everything that I have, and none of us have 100% of us all the time, right? It could
Right.
be maybe I only have 30% to give right now today to my wife, but guess what? She's going to get 100% of that 30% from me. Like
Right.
I'm going to give it all to her. And that's how it is. Or maybe jumping on this podcast, it's back east, it's 8 o'clock. I just had the whole day with the kids and all these things, right? I might only be at 60%, but guess what? You're getting all of that 60% and all that 60% attention, because that's where my feet are right now. And that's the way I like to look at it. And that's how it keeps me focused and things like that.
I love that, man. Well, I want you selfishly to bring the family out to Vegas sometime so we can do one of these in person. Maybe I'll talk you into smoking a cigar. I know you're
I'd love that.
pretty healthy guy, but I can usually talk people into a cigar. But I always like to end the podcast on a couple questions, and I'm going to add a few because of your military
Yeah.
career. Best lesson or takeaway from the military? I'm just always interested. Like if you could really distill all of that training, all that leadership training, all that combat experience down to like the lesson that you took away, I'd love to hear about that. I'd love to hear about what you're most looking forward to going into. We're recording this February of 2024, but we're a little bit ahead, so this might come out in March or April. What you're most looking forward to going into the rest of 2024, and then your favorite movie and why. So, military lesson, what you're most looking forward to, and your favorite movie and why, because I'm a movie junkie.
Yeah. Okay. Lesson in the military. There's a good amount. Um, how to walk the line of being humble and cocky at the same time.
Mm.
is huge, right? It's about knowing that you're capable at all times, but still being your humble self that you need to learn, and there's things that you don't know. And then to add on top of that is awareness. And that means situation, that means energy, that means emotion, that means self, that means the people around you, the awareness in the room, because the first step to making positive change is having awareness.
I
You
love that.
might you might make positive change by accident, but is that something that's something that you can't reproduce?
I remember one time, I think in Aitley, this would be an interesting study. Like, do people who have situational awareness gravitate to the military, or does the military make people have situational awareness? Because I feel like I was always that kid where, like, if I drove there once and then I got my license at 16, my mom was like, hey, we're going to Taco Bell, the one off of the air, way out in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, oh, yeah, I know how to get there. No problem. She's like, what do you mean you know how to get there? I'm like, well, you drove there once when I was like 14. I can still get there. But I feel like I have very good situational, spatial awareness. My wife is the exact opposite. Like one time we're walking down the street, just like going to get a burrito or something, and somebody was walking our way, and I just kind of like grabbed her with my right arm and shoved her behind my back and pushed her to the left side of me. And she just keeps talking and she's telling me about her day and everything. And she's like, what was that all about? I'm like, oh, you didn't see the homeless guy shuffling up the street with a razor blade in his hand and a screwdriver in the other hand? Yeah, I did. I wanted to put my body between him and you just in case he went crazy. At least give you some time to run if he's slashing me in the throat with a razor blade. It was about that time we decided to move out of LA. And she's like, no, I didn't even see him. I'm like, oh, this really terrifies me for you to be out with the kids when you can't even notice the homeless guy with the razor blade and the hacksaw in his hand. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, I love that idea of awareness, whether it's spatial or personal or internal. And I like that you started the interview with like, man, I had some holes in my heart when I was in my 20s and was not even aware of what was going wrong. And now, that's kind of your biggest lesson. So what are you most looking forward to going into 2024, and favorite movie and why?
Yeah, so I'm most looking forward to obviously building this business out, building this company, seeing what Apogee has to bring, and just enjoying life every day. Uh, I'm currently right now, while I'm building this out, I'm the stay-at-home dad. Um, so it gives me stress in a different way. Sometimes I like sometimes I'd rather be in a firefight, but
Right.
that's the type of stress that having a 4 and 2 year old is about. But I'm just grateful for the opportunity to spend time with my kids and get to know them and be here for them, because I'll never get this again,
Right.
right? So um but I'm going to start working and helping the greater community and the greater good for men again, and you know transitioning in those spaces and still being a great father and husband. And then favorite movie and why? Man, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with the Patriot right now.
Oh, that's such a good movie.
Yeah, there's so many that come to my mind. Like I got Pulp Fiction, The Sandlot. Like I'm
Yeah.
all over the place, and like I could probably watch The Sandlot on mute and still know every line.
Yep.
But I think just for the conversation that we've had, the things that it brings out in me, the father and the love of country, and he is the warrior in the garden. He didn't want to go to war,
Yeah.
but when he showed up, he was there.
Yeah,
And
dude. Mel Gibson is savage in that movie. In the scene where they
it's
kill his son and he goes after
yeah,
the redcoats. I mean,
yeah,
that's like man possessed. That's some savage shit in that scene.
yeah, and that's the switch that savage gentlemen have, and people who are capable can do. So it hits me I loved it as a kid, but it hits me differently as a father
Yeah.
who has had that kind of experiences now. And yeah, I'm gonna go with that and stick there.
Do you have a boy and a girl? Two girls, two
I
boys?
I do. I have a boy and a girl.
Okay, so I have a 6-year-old daughter. You know what else? What other movie hits differently once you have kids in not a good way? is Dirty Dancing. I rewatched that movie and I was like, fuck this guy, dude. He's like 30. She's like 17, maybe 18. Of course the dad was pissed that she was like sneaking away to get, dicked down by like some like camp counselor employee who's like sleeping with the staff. That movie grosses me out as an adult. And I don't know why I had to bring that up, but it just, I rewatched it. It was like on TV in the background or something. My wife was watching. I was like, this is a horrible movie now that I'm a parent. Like, why does anybody think this is like a romantic movie? It's disgusting. Anyway, I digress. I'm losing my mind now. Sorry, Chris. All right, dude. Well, any excuse that you have to get to Vegas or run an event out here or attend a convention to better grow your business, we would love to host you and your family, have the kids here, preferably in the summer when they can swim and we can have a good time outdoors. But we've got enough room for you, man. So let's try to do this in person sometime soon because it's been great getting to know you.
I would love that. That would be a great idea. And we didn't hit this on the conversation, but when we moved back east from Montana, we took a 50-day road trip in a 19-foot camper, with two toddlers, and we stopped in Lake Mead for a few days, and I loved the area. It was beautiful, and we had a great time. So
yeah, it's great out here. So all right, man. Well, hopefully we'll see you soon. And wait, where are you living now? You're now.
We're in southern Maine right now.
Okay, you're in southern Maine. Well, I am going to be in Maine for the Origin Jiu-Jitsu camp, so maybe I'll come out a day early and we'll go grab a drink or something.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, have a great one.